Hey guys, and as we're approaching the end of the Switch 1 era, and the beginning of the Switch 2 era, and inevitably a new 3D Mario game, I wanted to talk about Super Mario Odyssey, and how its influence over the Mario franchise during the Switch 1 era was really weird. It was really disappointing and lackluster, I would say, especially with how well it sold. But before we get started, I wanted to mention how I have a goal to hit 30,000 subscribers before the Switch 2 launches, so if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing, and if I hit that goal, I will give away a copy of the new Mario Kart game. But I'm sure most of you know that Mario Odyssey is one of the best-selling Mario games. It sold 29 million copies as of 2024, and it sold nearly as much as the new Super Mario Bros. Wii, a game which its influence dominated over the franchise for nearly a decade. Like, there are so many games that have the same general aesthetics and locations and character designs from New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Odyssey's influence is not even comparable. It's not even like a speck of dust compared to how much New Super Mario Bros. Wii had influence over the Mario franchise. It is just extremely disappointing. Like, I would even say the other 3D Mario games had more influence over the franchise over Odyssey. Like, we still see, like, a lot of influence from 3D World. Like, 3D World is still getting more acknowledgement than Odyssey nowadays. And then Sunshine and Galaxy also got more influence from their games in Mario spin-offs when those games were relevant. So, it's just really weird what has been happening with Odyssey. And with the general influence of this game, Pauline is the only playable character that was added because of Odyssey, and she doesn't even originate from Odyssey. She's from the original Donkey Kong. For comparison, Sunshine had Petey Piranha, Toadsworth, Pianta, Noki, and Shadow Mario that were added as playable characters. Galaxy had Rosalina, Luma, and Honey Queen, and even 3D Land and 3D World had Pom Pom and Sprixie Princess respectively. While they were only one character from those games, at least those characters originated from those respective games. We don't really have any character that originated from Odyssey that appeared as playable characters in any of the spin-offs, which I think is a huge missed opportunity. Happy is right there! If Lumas could work as a playable character, as well as Booze, then Cappy could easily work, and I'm honestly hoping that he's in Mario Kart 9, but it's just crazy how he hasn't appeared already. And so many of the NPCs could work really well as playable characters, like the Toasteranans, or the Shivarians, or the Valbonans. Like, there are so many that could work well, and then different enemies as well, like the Pokios, Uproots, Sherms. Like, there's a lot of them that would work really well as playable characters. And then also with general NPCs, like, aside from new Donkers, we really don't have any, like, NPCs that have appeared in any of the spin-offs. And for comparison, again, with the other 3D Mario games, Super Mario Sunshine's Piantas have appeared in many other Mario games. Like, even though they were only a playable character in, like, I think 1 or 2 games, they have been NPCs in many games, like Thousand Year Door, only a couple years after they first appeared, Mario Kart, Galaxy 2, Mario Party. They've appeared in so many games and spin-offs. And then Galaxy has Lumas that have appeared in, like, a lot of games as well. And it's just really disappointing because there's so many opportunities where Odyssey's NPCs could have worked well. One example that comes to mind is Paper Mario the Origami King. Even if not modified much, Odyssey NPCs and enemies would have done wonders to this game's world building and inherently lackluster NPC variety. It would have made this game feel much less restricted, and much more in line with Thousand Year Door, since Thousand Year Door was able to have things like Piantas and a lot of other NPCs. Like, it would have been cool to see Pokios and Shogun Studios, Gushins and Bubblanians in the Great Sea, or Bonitor tourists in Toad Town. It would have been really cool. And another thing is that Odyssey introduced plenty of species that are a part of Bowser's minions, like the Pokios that I mentioned, Sherms, Stairface Ogres, and then also enemies that would easily fit in with the rest of the cast like the Burbos, but none of them have appeared in recent spin-offs. I think it would have been really cool to see them in like newer Mario Party games, or a couple of the Mario sports games, even if they were in the background. Like, it's just really disappointing that none of the games are taking advantage of any of the characters that Odyssey has introduced. And then there's also the fact that Bowser's Castle got a complete redesign. It kind of looks like a historic Japanese castle, yet that has also never been acknowledged outside of Odyssey as well. And Odyssey's influence has kind of influenced a few things, but not in the ways that would really expand the scope of the franchise. The Mushroom Kingdom and Peach's Castle design from Odyssey is generally the standard nowadays, and did replace the new Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic for the most part. While I'm fine with this change, and even prefer it to the incredibly rigid and bland new Super Mario Bros. Wii theming, this shouldn't be the extent of Odyssey's influence in the Mario world. I think they should have, like, more locations from Odyssey, or at least have like some influence from the locations, like Tostarena or the Lost Kingdom, and kind of blend into like either like the jungle aesthetic or the desert aesthetic. Almost kind of like how the Mario movie kind of had like a Tostarena like area there, which I will mention in a little bit. The Mario movie definitely kind of is relevant to this topic, but I think more things like that in certain Mario games, they don't have to be the location outright, but I'd like to see at least some influence there, or some of the ideas that were in Odyssey, because I feel like a lot of things from Odyssey have kind of gone to waste over the years, with the fact that like barely any of its influence kind of impacted other games. And then there's also the one location that they do acknowledge from Odyssey, New Donk City. Literally the only location we see in other games, aside from Captain Toad. But Captain Toad is developed by EPD, so that's probably why like other locations kind of show up, but it still is pretty disappointing nonetheless. And sure, seeing New Donk City in games like Mario Golf is awesome, but I think it would be more interesting if we saw more locations. Like, why don't we see Bonneton or Steam Gardens? They would work perfectly in spin-offs. Like, I love how spin-offs are creating their own locations and unique identities, but I'd like to see, like, at least a little bit of influence from Odyssey there, because like I said, I feel like a lot of Odyssey's, like, ideas are kind of going to waste. And then, sometimes Nintendo does acknowledge Odyssey and its success, but just not in Mario spin-offs. They are clearly aware of its success, but are not acknowledging it in the ways that would really have that much impact over the Mario franchise. Like, it was actually the first Mario theme on Nintendo Alarmo, as well as one of the first Mario soundtracks on Nintendo Music. And it also got a limited time serial release, with the Super Mario serial being based around Super Mario Odyssey and working in Super Mario Odyssey. And then the game was also added to the games that were compatible with Nintendo Labo VR. So they've done a lot of like promotional things surrounding Mario Odyssey throughout the entire Switch era, even when we've gotten newer mainline Mario games like Mario Wonder. Like, they still continue to acknowledge Super Mario Odyssey as if it is a big success, which it is. But they don't do anything in the Mario spin-offs and games themselves. And it was also acknowledged quite a lot in the movie, which I alluded to before, with things like Tostarena, like I already mentioned, Toad's backpack referencing various locations, Crazy Cap appearing in the background, and Peach and Bowser's wedding outfits appearing. Honestly, I think the movie does a much better job at acknowledging things from Odyssey than the games do. It has a decent amount of influence from Odyssey, but it doesn't have too much influence. It isn't like the entire aesthetic, like how New Super Mario Bros. Wii kind of influenced a lot of games in the early 2010s. I think Odyssey's influence over the movie was, I feel like, the perfect amount, I would say. Maybe like slightly more for some instances, but I think like acknowledging some of the locations while also having like some influence like Crazy Cap, and also one thing that the movie didn't do, like adding NPCs from Odyssey, which I think it should do as well. I think that's a pretty good way of going about having some influence from Odyssey in the games. And then there's another thing. Super Mario 3D World seems to have a much bigger influence over the franchise than Odyssey. While I love 3D World, it's disappointing that this game is usually the extent that Nintendo goes to when including influence from 3D Mario games in the spin-offs. Some people may argue that it's because 3D World feels more familiar and Mario-esque, but I don't think the franchise really needs to stick within those boundaries, and 3D World already differs quite a lot from, like, the standard Mario norm, so I don't really think, like, Odyssey would be too much of a problem there. And the Mario franchise keeps evolving nowadays, and we are entering a new, very creative era for the franchise. Like, even early in the Switch era, we've seen the signs that the franchise was going in a more creative direction, so I think they really shouldn't worry about using some of the wackier and interesting themes from either Odyssey or Wonder. And I'm throwing Wonder in there too, because that's another game that I'm kind of worried about with it having like influence over the franchise or not. But thankfully, I think there's a lot of hope for the Switch 2 era, and mentioning Wonder kind of brings me into that next point, since I do think there is hope for both Odyssey and Wonder to be acknowledged more in the Mario franchise, since we've already seen from Mario Kart 9 having a lot of influence, or at least a little bit of influence from Wonder with the character designs. I could definitely see characters or locations appearing in some of the newer spin-offs. Like, I think there definitely is hope. And I'm hoping Mario Kart 9 will have characters and locations for both Odyssey and Wonder. I just think it would make a lot of sense, and I think both games deserve that influence. So I'm just really hoping that is the case for the Switch 2 era, and I'm also hoping that whatever 3D Mario game comes out next, I'm hoping that game actually gets the proper treatment, similar to how Sunshine and Galaxy did. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Blue Sky if you want to. Stay perky!